ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where we take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of big finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 18th of October 2019, we are starting to look at the final story for Tom Baker as the Doctor, Logopolis. Starting with part 1. Now, Logopolis was written by this season's script editor, and is the final story he script edited. Edited. Yeah, the script editor edited his own script. I can speak today. This is going great, Jacob. But Logopolis is written by Christopher Hamilton Bidmead. I give him the full name because he apparently wanted to be credited as Christopher Hamilton Bidmead, but it wouldn't fit on the cue card, on like the card for the title sequence. So they were like, "You're getting Christopher H. Bidmead, okay." Which is that's just a weird behind the scenes story that I always found kind of interesting. But yeah, Logopolis is written by Christopher H. Bidmead, and is a story that starts out. It makes no secret that the Master is back. There's this point where, you hear Anthony Ainley as the Master's evil laughter right in the first scene, which takes place right by a bypass where there's an actual police box that the Master's TARDIS disguised as a police box materializes around and eats a policeman, basically. Well, he grabs a policeman and pulls him in, basically killing the dude, which is quite funny. The entire story, the entire premise of this story is that the Doctor has decided maybe it's time to fix the chameleon circuit. So he basically is like, right, I'm just going to materialize around a police box, Adric, and we are going to basically measure it and try to get some actual dimensions of a police box, just so that the actual dimensions of the police box work. And we'll take it to this place called Logopolis. It's a planet that works on block transfer computation, which is this science fiction idea of numbers holding back the heat death of the universe. This is a story that's actually quite insane in this first episode. There's just a lot of concepts thrown at you, and they're thrown at you fast with no regard for your understanding and just your general understanding of what this story is. It's quick-paced, concept after concept after concept, in rapid fire, and I think that's actually a really good. It's actually done pretty well. The story itself is excellent. This first episode is excellent. It's a good opener. You start with the Doctor and Adric really show how well they work together. Because a lot of the Doctor and Adric, then once they materialize around this police box, which is actually the Master's TARDIS materialized around another police box, they've created this recursion loop. So you have a TARDIS inside another TARDIS, progressively getting darker in lighting, which is actually really atmospheric. The direction of this episode was done by Peter Grimwade, who does an excellent job directing. I think this is the first story he directed. He might have done Full Circle. I think he did Full Circle as well. But he brings some really good shots and does a lot. He does a lot of really cool stuff here with this, with playing around with the lighting and how just you have the entire TARDIS getting darker and darker, and that's sort of Adric and the Doctor's plotline throughout this first episode, which I think is great. Now, what you also have is that you have sort of the B plot, which is we're introduced to Tegan Jovanka, who is Australian, and played by Janet Fielding. She's basically becoming another companion here. She's basically starting her job as an air stewardess, and her auntie Vanessa is taking her to work for her first day of being an air stewardess. And she wears this really nice purple costume. I will say, this is one of those. Something that you'll start noticing throughout this entire season is that the companions and the doctor, they stop wearing regular clothes and they wear almost a deliberate costume. Like all previous doctors and companions, basically, yeah, they would have an overall look, but there'd be like slight alterations to make it look like actually different clothes. Now it's just one costume. But what happens is that Tegan and Auntie Vanessa's car, it gets broken down at the side of the road, and Tegan goes to the police box for help, and actually wanders into the TARDIS, which is quite fascinating. It's quite an interesting sort of thing, is that she gets, and then a lot of her stuff is her being confused when they're in the TARDIS, which is probably the most padding this episode has. I will say it's pretty obviously some padding. There's like, you could probably cut some of it, of her wandering around. But while she's wandering around, Auntie Vanessa gets attacked and killed by the Master, being shrunk down to a tiny size, which is the cliffhanger. The Doctor, like some policemen, find the car abandoned, and find the police officer and Auntie Vanessa both shrunken down and dead. And the Doctor makes his way out of the recursion loop. Edric is just listening inside, and then the big reveal is that the Doctor realizes the Master escaped, and he's already killed 2 people, which is a great cliffhanger. It's a really solid cliffhanger. It's shot really well. We end on a really good note, and it just sort of really ties together a lot of what this episode does. Does really, really well. It really does bring a solid start to Tom Baker's last story. So overall, I'm going to give Logopolis Part 1 an 8 out of 10. All right, it is the 19th of October 2019. I just finished watching Part 2 of Logopolis, second part of the story, which is a downturn in quality. Yeah, this one is very much a sort of a bridge. I mainly say it's a downturn in quality because throughout a lot of the first half, that padding with Tegan that was a problem in the first episode, well, it's kind of increased. There's a lot of just Tegan still wandering around the TARDIS, finding the cloister room, finding the Master's TARDIS door opening, and the Master doing nothing about it. Like, this is the point where you're supposed to be the villain. Like, you've had plenty of time that you could have attacked her. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to why would the Master not attack at this point? That's kind of what he does. This is the point in the story where usually there would be some sort of danger from the Master. It's just one of those things that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially considering, what the story's been doing beforehand. This is also just a story where you have like the Doctor and Adric's plot to try to run away from the Master is kind of dull. The cliffhanger resolution is actually pretty nice. The Doctor's is basically informally arrested by the police, and Adric basically, he finds a bike on the side of the road, makes it look like, oh, he's fallen off of this bike and hurt himself as a distraction so the doctor can get away. That's, that's a nice way to conclude this cliffhanger and give us some semblance of an ending for, to keep the story moving. And it does a decent job at that. What doesn't entirely work, at least for me, is then the fact that the story itself takes a detour of the Doctor like, yeah, let's just sink the TARDIS in that, and then open the doors, and that'll flush the Master out. Yeah, slight problem. The Master has a TARDIS. Like, the Master can escape. Like, he can come probably still track you down. He kind of knows where you're going. So this entire subplot of the Doctor basically trying to, like, escape the Master is futile. The audience knows that it's futile, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work well. In the context of the story, out of the context of the story, it's this weird sort of thing where it's like we're doing this aspect of the story, I guess, just to do it. That being said, they don't actually flush out the Master that way. Like, they end up landing on a boat docked on the River Thames, and on the River Thames, there's... You saw him in the first episode in long shots, but there's this character called the Watcher who just is sort of this pale figure. He doesn't ever quite get explained, but I'll talk about what he really is at the very end of this story. But he basically talks to the Doctor, and immediately Tom Baker's attitude shifts. Almost like just immediately into a more somber mode. Like, it just sort of the tone, and with that, so does the tone of the story. The story becomes automatically much more somber and much more reserved for a Doctor Who story. It's very much like, hey, we're slowing this down because this is big. Basically the idea is that now the Doctor sort of kind of has a vague idea that something bad is coming, and he's probably not going to be able to make it out alive. So what he does, like, the rest of his actions need to be informed through the lens of trying to make sure make sure Adric and then later Tegan is safe and ready, and he's basically ready to face whatever danger comes. Like, because after this scene, they immediately go to Logopolis. They immediately travel to Logopolis. But before that, we actually get a time where we get the scene where Tegan, the Doctor, and Adric actually meet each other. Tegan, Janet Fielding seems to be giving it her all, but they're just characterizing her as distraught, and which, I mean, arguably so. Which may be actually some of the most realistic acting in the series for what's been going on. She was basically kidnapped and now she's being taken to an alien planet against her will. You also have the cloister bell going off, signaling danger. This is the story where we actually get the explanation for what the cloister bell is, that it signals danger to man battle stations. Essentially, that's essentially what it is, and what it does in the context of the show. But what's really sad is that Tegan, the Doctor and Adric meeting Tegan is great. There's this amazing quip from the Doctor. It's like when he's like, "Have you seen my anti-vaccine? Small woman, red sport coat in a fur coat, red sports car. Yes. Oh, I've seen a little of her," which is this great sort of witty bit of comedy, and specifically dark comedy because she's dead. That just sort of comes out of nowhere and is is a really solid, just like this really funny, solid one-liner from the Doctor that you really wouldn't get in any other context. That is, it's really good. But yeah, the Doctor, Tegan, and Adric then basically go to Logopolis, where we get a sort of a full explanation of what block transfer computation is. It's basically the idea that the entire, like you can create matter out of mathematics. It's very technobabbly, but Bidmead actually does a pretty decent job of making it sound clever. Like, the numbers can create energy, and like the whispering of these numbers is what's been holding back the heat death of the universe. And you have the Doctor give the Monitor, who is like the he's kind of just the leader, his information on the TARDIS, and it's like, yeah, we'll fix up your chameleon circuit, no problem. It's really nice. It's like, it's this weird, ever so slight detour that actually kind of makes sense. Like, it's like, yeah, we're actually doing stuff. So, and the Doctor goes in to plug the numbers in, but make sure Adric and Tegan are left outside of the TARDIS, and because, well, one, the audience already knows that the Master has arrived. His TARDIS being now disguised as an ionic column instead of a police box. But then he kills one of the Logopolitans with his TCE, shrinking him, and basically, I guess, has put himself there. And then the Watcher seems to have brought, for whatever reason, it's not quite explained in this episode because it only happens right at the very end, has brought Nyssa from the last story in. And this is sort of, because this is the story where Nyssa becomes the companion, so now we have a 3-person TARDIS team. But there's not much time to really work any of this out, because suddenly the TARDIS shrinks, bam, cliffhanger. It's a good cliffhanger. And overall, the episode is good. It's just got a lot of padding, and again, sort of, it's slow, and then once they get to Logopolis, it's like really, really fast. They're rushing through a bunch of information and trying to get to a conclusion. So, it doesn't work quite as well. So I'm going to give Logopolis Part 2 a 6 out of 10. All right, it is the 19th of October 2019. I just finished watching Part 3 of Logopolis. Now, Part 3 of Logopolis is the episode where the Master actually shows up. And I don't want to say this is the episode where he actually affects the plot, because that would be doing a disservice to the first 2 episodes, where the Master's presence was most definitely felt, and you heard his laugh. But you didn't actually get to see Anthony Ainley. You only ever saw flashes of it. This is the first time where you see it, and this is also the first time where Anthony Ainley has to give a performance as the Master. And as the Master, this is actually, he's very much doing the suave Roger Delgado throughout this episode. He is cold and calculating. He's emotionally manipulative. He knows what he's doing. He has his plan, and he's determined to win. Now, of course, he can't win because this is Doctor Who. The villain never wins. But Anthony Ainley does manage to sell this performance, and this is one of the few times where he's actually in the series, in his many appearances, where he's actually allowed to play the Master, because they eventually make him a bit too over the top and a bit too flamboyant for the character itself, and they sort of stray too far away from just sort of who the Master is. I say this because that's just sort of what happens when doing Doctor Who stories like so. But the Master's plan here is basically take over Logopolis and control the universe. And it only starts to fall apart at the end of this episode, because you get the big reveal that Logopolis has been holding together the heat death of the universe. And there's just this moment where there's complete silence. And the idea is that that's the silence of the universe getting close to slowly dying. all because the master didn't quite realize that his plan had a fatal flaw. And oddly enough, it's a fatal flaw that for once he couldn't possibly foresee the idea that, oh, the master doesn't isn't going to have control over the entire universe, because he can't control the entire universe like this. It's the universe. And the big stakes here are great. A lot of the first half of the episode, it does feel kind of padded, like it's like we're trying to get the TARDIS back to normal size. And of course, they eventually do. That is one criticism I have sort of with Christopher H. Bidmead's writing in this story. It seems that, like, each cliffhanger seems to be... He seems to be relying on cliffhangers that are creating a problem that solves, not just a moment of peril and building up the action. It's sort of... Which is, I guess, sort of... It's what makes Logopolis overall feel so oddly paced as a story. In that it's not doing a standard rising action cliffhanger resolution, or back to rising action cliffhanger resolution, back to climax cliffhanger, down to complete resolution, resolve cliffhanger, resolve the story. It's doing some weird things with the structure, just I think because just that's the way that Bidmead is that's just the way Bidmead's decided that's how I'm gonna do it. There's nothing necessarily wrong with this type of storytelling. It's very possibly a great way of telling a story like that. There's but I think that perhaps this is an episode that maybe needed a little more time and a little more thought put behind it, to really get us to a to a better sort of conclusion as a story. It's not necessarily the best put together, nor is it the best story to be sort of included. It's as it stands, it is pretty good. It's a lot of fun. The final shot of the Doctor and the Master shaking hands, realizing they have to work together, go to the Pharaoh's Project on Earth, and try to hold everything at bay as the universe is starting to slowly collapse in on itself. As the stakes are at their highest. That's a really good aspect of this story that I think Bidmead does an excellent job of actually showing and explaining. But also, there's also something that's really nice that goes through this episode that I think this is the one time in the series where it actually makes a lot of sense and it actually works pretty well. The character of Nyssa, obviously, you make the Master confront her in the body of her father, initially confusing her, making her think he is just her father, before, and obviously doing a good impersonation of the caring man. That's something that Anthony Ainley and Sarah Sutton pull off beautifully. It's really well done, and it's almost like a necessary sort of addition to the story, where it's like, yes, this is how dark we're going. That the characters are definitely in some sort of real danger. It's one of those things where you get you really get the feeling that everything that everything is kind of stopping. That everything is kind of stopping here. And in stopping, it's being a complete, not only is it telling a complete story, but it is telling, it is telling a story. It's giving us a conclusion, and it's telling us, it's having a lot of fun with the characters and showing kind of who the characters are and what they might be. So overall, I'm going to give Logopolis Part 3 a 7 out of 10. Alright, it is the 20th of October 2019, and I just finished the Tom Baker era of Doctor Who with Logopolis Part 4. Logopolis Part 4, for the most part, is a story all about... That's basically just the characters going to a... going back on Earth to the Pharaoh's to what's known as the Pharaoh's Project, all in the TARDIS. The Doctor basically attempting to save the day, but he's with the Master, kind of, I guess, helping out. I guess the best that the Master can do, because it's the Master. It's not, the Master's obviously still trying to find a way to warp things to his own plan, his own design, to basically try to be like, all right, I need to try and basically, I need to basically build up a conclusion to the story based on all the characters basically finding a way to stop the universe by sneaking into the Pharaoh's Project, and going up into the tower, doing some math and saving the day. It's not the most story-wise. It's not the most technical. It's not the most technical of episodes, and the most like here are our very, very obvious conclusions to the story. But it is an episode that does a good job at attempting at building up an atmosphere right till the moment at the end, right to the very end, where the Fourth Doctor valiantly basically gives up his life for his friends, after the Master tricks him and he falls off a tower and basically and then dies. He regenerates and he regenerates on the ground, broken, essentially a broken character, with his friends around him, and it is a very powerful ending. It's an ending that just it works so well. It's one of those big endings where you get a good sense of things. You get a real feeling that everything perhaps isn't, that this is perhaps one of the this is like the idea that Bidmead's going for is that the Fourth Doctor essentially accepts that it's the end. He falls and is basically surrounded by his companions, even though they are kind of new companions. They aren't entirely, the most, it's as an ending, it finishes the season, and we get an explanation as to who the Watcher is. The Watcher was basically this other version of the Doctor, there to help him along in the regeneration, and basically to create a complete smooth transition. And the episode ends right on the regeneration, which is really nice. And then there's also a nice touch in that Peter Davison is credited as the new Doctor, and the Doctor's face, which has been in the credits for this season, was actually not included in the credits, which I thought was a really nice touch. Overall, this may not be the absolute best of all the regenerations, but it is definitely, a good ending for the Fourth Doctor. And you know what? There's some amazing stuff here. There's this amazing speech given by the Master saying, people of the universe, please attend carefully. This message contains vital information to the continued existence of you all. And there's just a lot of really, really good moments here. And it really just sort of shows, it ends the Fourth Doctor era on a pretty decent high. It's not his best story, but it's nowhere, but it's still a good story. It's still decent. So overall, I'm going to give Logopolis Part 4 an 8 out of 10. That being said, we add up the scores and average out to give Logopolis, Tom Baker's final story, a final score of 7.25 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for once again for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Thank you for basically watching. We've made it through the first 4 Doctors, and we still have 4 Doctors to go, essentially. So join me. As always, please leave a like. Comment your opinions on the story down in the comments. I'd like to get a conversation going, and subscribe. And, of course, join me next time when we start to look at the 5th Doctor, Peter Davison's run of Doctor Who with CASTROVALVA.